In 1508, a Portuguese admiral defied the orders of the King of Portugal and sent a terrifying letter to the chief of an Indian city. In the letter, he not only promised to kill him, but also to burn his city and everyone responsible for killing his son. And he ordered his enemy and his allies to arm themselves and meet him in the seas of Diu, because he would destroy them all, one by one. Francisco de Almeida, the Viceroy of India, after losing his only son, ignored the orders of his king. Dom Manuel faced one of the greatest naval forces of three combined empires, destroying a fleet of almost 200 vessels with only 17 Portuguese ships. And the acts he would commit were so barbaric and so impressive that they not only spread terror across the Indian seas, but also changed global geopolitics forever. In today's video, we will talk about the Battle of Diu and how the revenge of a grieving father forever changed the course of the Portuguese Empire. To understand the core of the Battle of Diu, we need to go back in time to the establishment of Portuguese India. The Portuguese arrived in India in 1498 with the navigator Vasco da Gama. And, as Charles Boxer points out in his book Portuguese Maritime Empire, the Portuguese arrived in the Indian Ocean at the most opportune moment possible. India was full of small kingdoms and city-states and was religiously fragmented, with Islamic and Hindu parts mixing together. But the Portuguese did not have an easy life in those seas. The Zamorin of Calicut promised to protect the Portuguese, and then he authorized an attack against the troops of Pedro Álvares Cabral, resulting in the death of dozens of sailors. Not to mention that the Portuguese left behind by Vasco da Gama on his first voyage had also been killed with the Zamorans' permission. This motivated Dom Manuel to assemble the so-called Squadron of Revenge, where Vasco da Gama would strike terror in the Indian seas and establish a trading post in Cochin and Dom Manuel. Seeing his territories in India becoming more and more consolidated, he establishes a viceroyalty, appointing Francisco de Almeida as the first Viceroy of India. Francisco de Almeida had the mission of developing those new Portuguese territories, expanding them, and he counted on the help of his only son, Lourenço de Almeida, who acted as his right-hand man and showed great expertise in navigation. The young Lourenço commanded ships and established ties with Ceylon and other Indian cities, and he even commanded naval fleets in battles on behalf of his father, in 1506 leading several ships. He won the Battle of Cananor against the Zamorin of Calicut and his allies, thus opening the possibility to begin the siege of the city. This would further help the Portuguese establish their viceroyalty there. But all of that would change. In March 1508, with the Portuguese closing the seas to the Mamluk trade in Egypt, the Venetians felt harmed in their spice trade. That's because, with the spices leaving the Indian Ocean and going up through the Red Sea, the Venetians bought from the Mamluks and Ottomans, reselling at high prices in the European market, departing through the Mediterranean. And so, the Venetians helped the Ottomans and Mamluks assemble a grand fleet to put an end to the Portuguese. In this way, the Ottoman Empire, the Mamluk Sultanate, and the Kingdom of Cambay, with the support of the Venetians, assembled a fleet made up of 6 carracks and 46 galleys. Soon they appeared on the horizon, determined to wipe out the Portuguese presence in the Indian Ocean, encountering a few sails and caravels commanded by Lourenço de Almeida. But instead of fleeing, Lourenço decided to face the invading force. And so, the Battle of Chao is fought, where Lourenço leads his men with courage until death. And in this battle, Lourenço had a truly heroic performance. After being hit in the leg, he sits in a chair and ties himself to the ship's mast, from where he continues to give orders to organize the naval battles. However, he ends up being hit directly by a cannonball, dying instantly. The Ottomans and Mamluks believed that this victory would be a clear message to the Portuguese that they would not easily dominate the Indian Ocean. But then, they end up realizing that the man tied to the mast was the son of the viceroy. The death of Lourenço was a hard blow for Francisco de Almeida. That was the heroic and brutal death of his only son, killed, tied to the mast of a ship. Commanding troops loyal to his father, his son achieved glory and a heroic death at the age of 28, and even disabled, he kept on fighting. Thus Almeida saw himself as an old man who had nothing left to lose. The viceroy, filled with hatred, decided it was time to avenge his son's death. And this would happen by directly confronting the murderers. One of the men who had commanded the Indian troops at the Battle of Shaw was Malik Ayaz, captain of Diu. Knowing that the defeated force was not the entire Portuguese force, he decides to write to the Viceroy Francisco de Almeida to calm things down, reporting that his son fought bravely, that the coalition took prisoners in the battle, but that the Portuguese prisoners were being very well treated and could be negotiated soon. But Francisco de Almeida's response did not go as expected. Instead of negotiating and asking for the prisoners, he sends a very clear letter. I, the Viceroy, tell you, Honorable Captain Malik Ayaz of Diu, that I am going to your city with my men, bringing the people who were welcome there, who in Shaw fought against my people and killed the man who was called my son. And I come with hope in God of heaven to take revenge on them and those who helped them. And if I don't find them, I will take your city to pay for everything, and you for the help you gave in Shaw. I tell you this so that you know that I am going as I am now on this island of Bombay, as the one who brings this letter will inform you. In other words, Almeida, instead of calming things down and trying to negotiate, was setting up a battle. And he even threatened that if he didn't find anyone there, it would be worse because he would massacre the entire city because of what they did to his son. Instead of carrying out a surprise attack, Almeida says exactly where he is, what he will do, and basically tells them to wait for him armed because he will take revenge on everyone. However, Almeida couldn't go immediately because of the approaching monsoon season, with torrential rains almost every day in that region of India. It was necessary to wait almost a year until there were good conditions for battle, and yet Almeida's desire for revenge is soon interrupted by a letter from King Dom Manuel. The King of Portugal planned to close the Indian Ocean, and for that he had sent Afonso de Albuquerque with this mission, appointing him as the new viceroy. This would take power away from Almeida before he could complete his revenge for his son's death, but Almeida could not allow that. He then declares that Dom Manuel's letter is fake and orders Afonso de Albuquerque to be arrested as an impostor. The new appointee would only take over after he had completed his revenge, and so the Portuguese fleet heads towards Dio. The Portuguese had 9 carracks, 6 caravels, 2 galleys, and a brigantine. But when they got there, the coalition had managed to gather many more ships, and they had 10 carracks, 6 heavy galleasses, 30 light galleys, and 150 support vessels. And that's how 17 Portuguese ships encountered almost 200 coalition ships, including Mamluks, Ottomans, and Indians, supported by the Venetians. However, as intimidating as the coalition fleet was to any opponent, the Portuguese had better ships and very experienced sailors. While many galleys used rowers to propel the ships, the Portuguese relied exclusively on the power of the wind. This left the sailors free to both maneuver the ship and operate the cannons. And the cannons, positioned on the sides, had the potential to cause enormous damage to the enemies. While the Venetian and Mamluk galleys generally had smaller cannons at the front, the Portuguese had several cannons positioned along the sides of their ships, ready for simultaneous firing. The Portuguese even fired low shots almost at the waterline to pierce the hulls of ships, causing them to quickly sink when hit. And so, for 6 hours, the Portuguese bombarded the Mamluk Ottoman fleet until they achieved the unlikely victory. But Almeida was not satisfied with just that. His revenge began to take on traits of sadism toward the defeated. Some were burned alive, others were hanged. But some executions were particularly notorious. Since his son was killed by a cannonball that could have been fired by anyone there, he ordered the living prisoners to be blown up by the Portuguese cannons. And, moreover, he scattered the remains of soldiers at the gates of Diu. Finally, he ordered a massive bombardment and set the city on fire. And the chroniclers say that seeing the city burn, he is said to have uttered the famous phrase, "On the day you died, you had no funeral, and I couldn't light a single candle for you. But today, I light the whole city for you, my son." With a clear conscience, Almeida finally leaves the position of Viceroy of India. He frees and hands over command to Afonso de Albuquerque, who would further expand Portuguese rule in Asia. And he sets off towards Portugal, where he would answer to King Dom Manuel. But on the way, Almeida would end up dying on the African coast after stopping to resupply the ships with water and being attacked by the Khoi natives. Through the Battle of Diu, Almeida not only managed to avenge his son, but also showed all of Asia what would happen to anyone who dared to challenge Portuguese power in that ocean. And determination, courage, and brutality were the marks left not only by a great admiral, but above all, by a man. He had nothing left to lose. And you, did you know the story of the Battle of Diu? What surprised you the most? So, go ahead and leave your comment right now to support our work and take the opportunity to become a member of the channel right now. That way, you'll have access to exclusive content so that you can not only support our work, but also dive deeper and learn even more about the fascinating Iberian history.